So we have been talking about this GDP, and we have been talking about the long-term trend and the short-term fluctuations around this long-term trend. We have also been talking about what really drives these short-term fluctuations, the nature of shocks and the frictions. But now let's just take a step back and try to see if we can find some lens of understanding how do we really get around calculating and measuring this GDP. What are the different ways in which we can think about it? Yes, we understand that measurement is noisy. Yes, we understand that measurement is also not easy. It has, different scale to it. There is a time problem to it. There is a methodological problem to it. There are some statistical dilemmas that are also involved in measurement of it. But in all of this, is there still some neat way to really think about it? Is there a mental model to think about GDP? When I look at GDP, can I go beyond the word GDP and try to see different constituents of GDP and how these things are moving together or in divergence with each other? That is what we are going to study. Now, as always, I want to fix the intuition first. So you probably, once you understand the intuition in a very simple term, you will never forget it in your life. For this particular thing, which is technically called as national income accounting, I am not going to put up an equation in front of you. Okay, that is how textbooks would do it, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to take you back to your school days. So back in your school, sometimes you would have a school fair. Right? The whole function on let's say on a foundation day, etc. You would probably have a school fair that is being organized, where the idea would be that many stalls would probably happen. Students will probably put up these stalls. Sometimes they would be selling some artifacts, some handcrafted items or some jute bags or something. In some other stall, the students might be probably cooking something, a burger or maybe a pizza as well. In certain other stalls, the students might have put up some games. Back in my days, there was usually this particular game where you had a string tied up between two extremes and you had to pass a ring through it without the ring really touching the string. Otherwise, there would be an electrical short circuiting of sorts. So there were these sort of games that you would probably have at stalls. I'm sure that you probably still have a game of shooting the balloons, all sorts of things happen in a school fair, right? Now, if you think about the school fair as basically representation of an economy, right? What really is happening in a school fair? There are these students who are behind the stall, they have a counter set up and they are engaged in the production of some product or service. They are either providing you a product or they are providing you some sort of a service, right? And then different students would come and visit this particular stall. They probably, buy these product or services. Some nominal money would get exchanged, 200 rupees, 100 rupees. That is the nature of things that we are allowed at the school level. And then this person who is probably sitting behind the stall and, collecting money will then, at some point that person will excuse himself, take that money and tell his friend to watch out this particular stall. I'm just going to come back and take a round of it myself, right? So this person will go around and visit other stalls, and maybe he would probably fancy a burger stall and may go and buy a burger for himself and maybe shoot some balloons along the way and come back after an hour back to his stall, where now he will be attending to other students, but this time these other students will be customers and he will be the one who will be servicing these customers. Right? That goes on and about. Okay. That, if you really look closely, is exactly what happens in the economy also. I, as a student who has put up this stall, I receive money from my fellow classmates or my fellow schoolmates because I'm producing something. I take this money and I know that there is only a certain amount of it that I can call as profit. Right? If I'm, for example, selling chocolates or I'm selling some really nice burger, etc., or if I have that balloon thing installed up here, I paid some money upfront to somebody, right? There is all the cash that I get is not everything that I can spend immediately. That some of that cash will offset the things that I have bought and arranged this stall with, but there will be some cash that I can deem as profit or maybe my compensation. I'll take that and I will go around and shop at other places. So in the time period when I am at the stall, I am a producer. But when I take this cash and I visit other stalls, I become a consumer. That is the duality that we all have in our lives. When I go and work somewhere, I'm working, I'm producing something. Okay. For example, right now when I'm creating this lecture, I am working, I am supplying my labor, I am creating this particular productized service as we discussed. And then in the evening when all of this will be done, I will go out to the market and I will shop, I will eat something, I will probably buy something. That is the time when I am going to consume things produced by other people who work through the day to produce those things. Right? So it is this big circle that we all are a part of, and there is this duality that we have. At some point in the day we are producers, at some point in the day we are consumers, and we all are in this big giant school fair of sorts, okay, where without even realizing it, we just make the entire thing go round and round and round. That is the way to think about the economy also. It is technically called as the circular flow, and this diagram that you see is precisely what it is. Now this diagram has some more nuances to it, but the basic story is exactly the same story as that of a school fair. You see these households and you see these businesses who inhabits these things, human beings, us. So when we are supplying our labor, that is when we are, as an household, we are supplying our labor. And where is this labor being exchanged? In economics, we like to put labels and create these technical entities. So we're calling them as a resource market. So in this resource market, there is this labor that we are supplying is being demanded by the firms, the businesses. So firms and households meet in this labor market, and labor is exchanged at a certain price. Then obviously the households in exchange for this labor get money, so they get wages, they get income, right? And if you look at what do they do with income, that is the bottom market, the product market. So the businesses, meanwhile, having taken these households' labor, has produced something which it would come and probably sell it in some market. The households return back to these markets with the salary, now this time as a shopper, as a consumer. Remember the guy who took that cash and went around visiting other stalls? That is what the households become now. The bottom half of this circle, the households go and purchase these goods and services and eventually pay cash, and these cash becomes the revenue stream for the businesses, and the businesses are able to pay the salaries and so on and so forth. That is the whole circular flow of this economy, okay, which is exactly like that school fair example. It is all going in the same circus without us even realizing it, or we are not even orchestrating it at some level. It just happens because everybody is trying to be a producer and a consumer at the same time. Okay. Now, if you look at it, this circular flow diagram a little bit more carefully, there is another nuance to it. There is this orange and there is this green circles. Okay. And that is really the distinction that we have already studied. Can anyone take a guess of what is this other duality that we are looking at in terms of orange and green? Yes, some of you are guessing it right. This duality is what we spoke about as a difference between the nominal and the real side. Okay. Remember our apples and oranges example. The apples and oranges were the real thing, but we had to convert them into monetary units and go to the nominal side in order to tease out the action or the story on the real side. It's in the same spirit that we have this duality. Now, if you really now want to understand this, okay, think of what happens whenever you go to a shop to buy something. Now I know most of us now usually buy it online. Okay, we just order it on Blinkit or Swiggy, etc., and maybe we don't really go to actual shops, but sometimes we also do. Sometimes, particularly if you have to buy a clothing or something, we do, right? So let's say you want to buy a nice jacket for yourself. You go to a lifestyle shop in a mall. Okay, you go and you select some particular shop, and then you come to the counter. What exactly happens at the counter? At the counter, if you really look carefully, here is what happens. The person standing behind the counter is holding that jacket. You are standing on the opposite side of the counter, and you are basically holding, let's say, a currency note. Okay, and in that moment, these two things are exchanged. This piece of jacket, which is a real thing, you can feel it, you're going to consume it by wearing it, right? You're going to eat it, but you're going to still consume it by wearing it. That's a consumption part of it. This jacket goes to you, okay, and the money from your pocket comes to the counter. Okay, any exchange that is being done in this fashion will have these two parallel flows. But if you look at the direction of these flows, the direction is exactly the opposite. The jacket goes from the shop owner to you, the money comes from you to the shop owner. So the arrow of money is pointed in the direction which is opposite to the arrow of the real thing. And that is exactly what this diagram actually shows. If you look at it carefully, you will find that these two circles, the green and the orange circles that there are, the inside and the outside circle, the arrows move in exactly the opposite direction. The green thing is the arrow of money. The red thing or the orange thing is the arrow of the real thing. So for example, in the upper half of it, in the right quadrant, the households are supplying their labor, they are supplying their time. So the arrow goes from the households to this resource market. And then this labor comes to the businesses, so the arrow goes further countercyclical. But the money which is businesses paying to the households as either rental revenue or as basically salaries, it goes in the other direction. But the exact thing flips when you come to the lower part of this circular flow. The households, when they go and visit the market, which is what the example was, they buy stuff. So the stuff is now flowing from the businesses, their warehouses and their shops to the households. So that is the orange arrow pointing now from the businesses to the households. But the money arrow now, the households are spending from their wallets, goes from the households to the businesses. So the money arrow runs in the opposite direction. Now that is the circular flow. In this, there is also this third entity which we haven't really talked about besides business and households, which is also right up there, and that's the government. It's right at the center. And you notice what the government is trying to do, right? The government is trying to basically tax both the businesses and households, right? That is what it primarily does, and we'll figure out this in more detail when we discuss the fiscal policy. But if you see, the government is just taking taxes from both the business and households, and what is it providing? It's providing some goods and services. What could be the nature of these goods and services? The infrastructure, right? The roads, the highways, the airports, all of that is provided by the government. So the government is also engaged in providing all of those goods and products and services, right? But also taxing. So the government arrows are basically providing to real things to both, but actually taking money from both, right? That's the third entity, government. In our school fair, there was no such government. You could probably have a government if you were to think about some particular, let's say the school fair was organized by a particular club at the school, right? And that club really provided you with the infrastructure. It provided you with the stalls, it provided you with a nice carpeted area within the stall, it provided you with nice tables and chairs, it provided you with bulbs and electricity, wiring and decoration. That is what a government does. And in return for this, the school club might actually appropriate some portion of your revenue. Doesn't really happen in a school, but that is a way to think about the role of government. Okay, that is a circular flow. So I hope this is clear. Now there is one important thing that this probably leads us to. Okay, if you have already gotten the gist of it, the way we are doing it, we are approaching it from first principles, and we're building one logical block after another. This is one logical block, right? That the entire economy can be looked at as just a circle. Now remember, I started this session by saying that we want to understand the GDP through some lenses, through some disaggregated terms, right? How do we then use this particular lens to understand what are the components of GDP, what are the constituents of GDP? That is what we do in the next one.